Imagine walking through the streets of Rome over 2,000 years ago, where the air smells of freshly baked bread. The chatter of citizens fills every alley, and the city's heartbeat can be felt in the rhythm of merchants calling out their wares. Before the sun climbs higher, Rome is already alive, a city of ambition, tradition, and the ordinary lives of people who built an empire. If you enjoyed diving into the secrets of ancient history, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment about what daily life in ancient Rome fascinates you the most. Now, let's step back in time and wander through Rome as it awakens. The first glimmers of sunlight stretched over the terracotta rooftops and marble columns of Rome, cast a soft golden glow across the city as if illuminating an empire yet to fully awaken. From the hills surrounding the Tiber, the river shimmered faintly in the morning mist, reflecting the arches of stone bridges and the silhouettes of early risers. In the narrow, winding streets of the Subura district, a faint murmur of life, big dog barking, the creak of shutters lifting. Children's laughter carried through the alleys, mingling with the distant rhythm of footsteps on cobblestones. Each home seemed to breathe with its inhabitants, as if the city itself was stretching awake, stretching the shoulders of a massive organism that had been alive for centuries. Lucius, a young scribe, stirred from his modest bed, rousing to the scent of baked bread wafting from a nearby bakery. The aroma mingled with the earthy damp of the Tiber's early morning fog, creating a scent unique to the city he called home. His mother moved quickly, setting a simple breakfast of porridge sweetened with honey and studded with dried figs upon the small wooden table, urging him to eat quickly if he hoped to witness the forum in full motion before the sun reached its zenith. His father, a minor clerk in the Senate, sat cross-legged on a low stool, carefully unrolling the day's edicts on parchment, reading aloud the latest decrees in a voice that carried over the quiet morning sounds. In countless homes across Rome, similar scenes unfolded. Women drew water from public fountains, balancing clay vessels carefully on their heads. Children chased small pets through the streets, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. Men polished tools or reviewed their plans for the day, readying themselves for labor that would occupy every hour until the sun began its descent. By the time the sun had fully emerged, the streets had transformed into arteries pulsing with commerce, conversation, and the ordinary yet extraordinary lives of citizens. Vendors wheeled carts, overflowing with fresh olives, fragrant figs, and golden honey, their calls carrying down narrow lanes like a chorus. Olives, figs, honey, fresh for your morning, they cried, their voices rising above the clatter of wheels on stone and the occasional bark of a dog. Fishmongers arranged silver-scaled catches atop crushed ice and beds of seaweed, their glinting forms reflecting the sunlight in a dance of sparkle and shadow. Bakers removed loaves from wood-fired ovens, the crusts crackling as they released clouds of warm, yeasty air that drifted into every alleyway. Merchants from distant lands arrived, draped in colorful fabrics and bearing exotic spices or finely woven linens. They navigated the crowded streets with ease, negotiating prices with Roman buyers eager for the luxury of distant lands. Senators strolled in flowing togas, accompanied by attendants carrying scrolls or small parcels, while plebeians moved steadily through the crowds, balancing baskets of food and goods on their heads. Every alley, every corner, was alive with motion. The city, in these hours, revealed itself as a living organism, a harmonious yet chaotic mixture of ambition, survival, and tradition. In the Forum, the center of political and social life, the activity was even more pronounced. Marble columns gleamed faintly in the rising sun, and the voices of senators and magistrates rang through the porticos as they discussed policy, trade, and military matters that stretched across the empire. Philosophers and poets gathered in shaded areas, their debates a delicate dance of rhetoric and intellect, ideas flying as freely as the morning breeze. Street performers entertained small crowds, juggling, singing, and recounting tales of heroes past, offering a glimpse of wonder amid the practical concerns of daily life. The Forum itself seemed to hum, a living testament to the city's vibrancy, ambition, and enduring spirit. Life in Rome depended on the labor of countless hands. Artisans hammered bronze, carved marble, and shaped clay into amphorae for the storage of wine, oil, and water. Blacksmiths rang hammers against glowing iron, sparks dancing like tiny stars in the morning light. Potters spun clay on wheels, shaping each vessel with skill honed through years of repetition. Farmers arrived from nearby countryside, their carts laden with grains, vegetables, and fruits, ready to provide the city with sustenance. Even children played a part, running errands, delivering messages, or carrying water for their families, learning the responsibilities that would one day define them as adults. In every home, shop, and street corner, the daily rituals of labor maintained the life and pulse of the empire. No morning in Rome could pass without attention to the gods, whose favor was sought in every aspect of life. Small shrines decorated corners of streets and homes, offering incense, oil, or coins in prayer. Temples opened their grand doors to the faithful as priests intoned chants that reverberated across the city. Even in the midst of bustling commerce, citizens paused to pay homage to Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and the many deities whose names were etched into the daily consciousness of Romans. These rituals were as necessary as bread and water, grounding life in a spiritual rhythm that tied the mundane to the divine. As mid-morning approached, the sun climbed higher, illuminating mosaics and frescoes on the walls of public buildings. Fountains sparkled, casting reflections across busy streets, and citizens paused briefly in their tasks to converse, exchange news, or share gossip. Lucius moved through the forum, ink and parchment in hand, observing the city's energy with a sense of reverence. Merchants bargained with intensity, philosophers debated passionately, children darted between columns, and artisans labored over their crafts. Rome was more than stone and marble, more than politics and commerce. It was a living, breathing organism, sustained by the countless small acts of its inhabitants. Lucius's attention was drawn to a vendor, meticulously stacking figs into perfect pyramids. He marveled at the precision and patience required for such work, realizing that the strength of Rome lay not solely in its armies or walls, but in these seemingly ordinary acts, the meticulous, thoughtful contributions of everyday citizens. As he paused to reflect, the bustling city around him continued, each individual a note in the grand symphony of Roman life. The streets and markets continued to swell with activity. Women carried baskets overflowing with freshly baked bread. Children tugged at the hems of their mothers' tunics, and travelers from distant provinces arrived, bringing with them the sights, sounds, and smells of faraway lands. Each encounter, each transaction, was part of the living tapestry of the city. The forum echoed with laughter, debate, and the clinking of coins as vendors and buyers struck deals. Philosophers paused to observe the lively scene, using it as a backdrop for lessons on morality, virtue, and the nature of human ambition. Lucius wandered through narrow alleys, pausing at a small fountain where a group of children splashed and played. He observed the carved figures decorating the fountain's base, stories of gods and heroes frozen in marble, yet somehow breathing life into the morning scene. Nearby, a potter's wheel spun endlessly, shaping the clay into vessels that would carry food, oil, and wine across the city. Each action seemed simultaneously mundane and monumental, a testament to the way daily life, repetition, and care could uphold an empire more effectively than swords or politics alone. By late morning, Rome's streets had become a theater of human life. Senators retired to their private meetings, artisans labored with focus, and vendors shouted to attract the attention of passers-by. The city's heartbeat quickened, pulsing in time with the movement of carts, the stamping of feet, and the cadence of merchants' voices. Lucius found himself reflecting on the delicate balance of power, tradition, and daily ritual that allowed Rome to thrive, understanding that the city's glory was not in monumental architecture alone, but in the countless lives that sustained it day by day. Even as he prepared to return home for a brief rest, Lucius took a moment to observe a small shrine tucked in the corner of a bustling street. A woman knelt, offering a coin to a statue of Venus, her face serene and focused. A baker paused to pray before opening a fresh batch of bread, and children darted past, laughter ringing through the morning air. In these moments, Rome was alive in the most human of ways, a city built not just by emperors and generals, but by ordinary people whose daily rituals, work, and devotion gave the empire its enduring strength. If you've enjoyed wandering the streets of ancient Rome and seeing the city come alive through its morning rituals, don't forget to like this story, share it with friends who love history, and subscribe for more immersive journeys into the past. Drop a comment below about which part of Roman daily life fascinates you the most: the bustling markets, the sacred rituals, or the life behind the city's grand walls. Your engagement helps keep history alive for everyone. As the sun crested over the 7 hills, the city of Rome awoke, not with the pomp of senators or generals, but with the quiet hum of its laborers, the heartbeat of the empire that often went unnoticed by those who wielded power. In the workshops and open-air markets, the real machinery of Rome began to turn. From the hammering of blacksmiths to the gentle spin of potters' wheels, the city's streets resonated with the rhythms of toil and craft, each sound a testament to a civilization built upon countless hands. In a small street near the campus, Marcus, a blacksmith named Marcus, crouched over his anvil, sparks dancing like fireflies as his hammer struck molten iron. His forearms were thick with muscle, each swing precise, practiced, and powerful. He crafted tools for farmers, nails for carpenters, and weapons for soldiers. Each piece carried a silent promise that Rome would endure through the skill of those who shaped her metal. The heat from the forge radiated through the cramped workshop, mingling with the smell of coal, hot iron, and sweat. Marcus paused briefly to wipe his brow, his eyes scanning the city beyond the small doorway, watching carts rattle down cobblestone streets, full of goods and passengers alike. Every clang of his hammer resonated in harmony with the morning chorus of Rome, the cries of merchants, the neighing of horses, the laughter of children on errands. Nearby, a potter named Livia worked at her wheel, her hands coated in fine, grey clay. She molded amphiri jars and bowls with patient precision, knowing that her creations would carry wine, oil, or grain across the city and even to distant provinces. As the wheel spun, she hummed softly, a tune passed down from her mother, a rhythm that helped measure the thickness of the clay and the curve of each vessel. Apprentices assisted her, learning the delicate balance of pressure, speed, and moisture required to produce perfect shapes. Livia watched as one young apprentice struggled with a particularly large amphora, her hands guiding his, correcting the angle, the pressure, the motion. Patience, she reminded him. Rome is built one hand, one vessel at a time. Outside her workshop, the streets were beginning to swell with life. Farmers arrived from surrounding fields, carts laden with vegetables, fruits, and grains, ready to supply the bustling markets. The city itself seemed to inhale deeply as the volume of human activity increased. Every delivery, every shout, every transaction feeding its pulse. Across the Tiber, a carpenter named Gaius worked on timber planks in his open-air shop. He measured, cut, and joined wood with skill honed over decades. From the framing of modest homes to the construction of furniture for the wealthy, Gaius's hands were a conduit between raw material and human need. He paused to inspect a finely carved chair destined for a senator's villa, running his fingers over its polished surface and admiring the precision of the joinery. Outside his shop, children darted between market stalls, shouting and laughing, while merchants argued the merits of olive oil or the freshness of fish. Even in the chaos, Gaius found rhythm and purpose. Each board he cut, each joint he crafted, contributed to the invisible scaffolding that held the city together. Meanwhile, in the outskirts, the farmers of Rome were already deep into the day's work. Fields stretched toward the horizon, rows of wheat swaying in the morning breeze. Lucius, a young farmhand, followed his father across the soil, plucking weeds, tending to irrigation channels, and inspecting grain for pests. Nearby, a herd of goats grazed while the oxen plowed new furrows. Sweat dripped down Lucius's back, and the sun climbed higher, but the work continued unceasing, necessary, and vital. The food these laborers produced would feed senators, merchants, and soldiers alike, sustaining the empire far more directly than the speeches delivered in marble halls. The markets themselves were a microcosm of Rome's industrious life. Merchants arranged goods in perfect order, jars of olive oil gleaming under the sun, baskets of fruit stacked like pyramids, fish displayed atop beds of crushed ice, their scales shimmering. Buyers inspected, negotiated, and bartered, their voices rising and falling in an intricate dance. Women carried baskets of eggs and bread, men jostled each other to secure the best deals, and children ran errands, observing and learning the subtle arts of commerce. The market was both spectacle and necessity, a place where labor met exchange, and the value of work was made visible. In workshops scattered throughout the city, artisans of every kind labored tirelessly. A weaver seated at a loom produced fine fabrics for tunics, patterns intricate enough to please a wealthy matron. Jewelers bent over delicate pieces, setting stones in gold and silver, while shoemakers stitched leather sandals, their hands moving in a practiced rhythm that seemed to echo the pulse of the city itself. Every act of craftsmanship, however small, contributed to the identity of Rome. It was a city not merely of marble and stone, but of human skill and perseverance. Even the seemingly mundane tasks bore significance. Water carriers delivered fresh water to public fountains and homes, maintaining health and hygiene. Bakers prepared bread that would sustain citizens through long days of labor. Scribes copied texts and documents that preserved the knowledge and administration of an empire. Each individual, though often overlooked in the grand narratives of history, held the empire together through diligence, knowledge, and devotion to daily work. Lucius, having wandered through the market and workshops, paused by a blacksmith's forge. The rhythmic clang of hammer on iron was hypnotic, a reminder that Rome's power was built not only through conquest, but through the sweat and skill of its people. He observed Marcus shaping a plowshare with care, realizing that this simple tool would enable farmers to cultivate land, feed families, and keep the city alive. The thought struck him that the might of Rome lay in its citizens' work, and every hammer strike, every spin of the potter's wheel, every plow cutting through soil, was a building block of the empire's enduring legacy. By midday, the city hummed with a relentless energy. The sun illuminated mosaics and frescoes on public buildings, highlighting scenes of gods, heroes, and emperors. Yet, it was the ordinary people, the laborers, craftsmen, and farmers, who gave life to the stories depicted in stone. Without their toil, the grandeur of Rome would be hollow, the splendor of marble and gold meaningless. Lucius understood this, walking past workshops filled with apprentices learning their trades, absorbing the lessons of skill, patience, and perseverance that would one day make them the backbone of the city. The labor continued with fervor. Farmers returned from fields, delivering goods to markets. Artisans completed orders for merchants and patrons. Builders measured and cut wood for houses, furniture, and public structures. Children ran errands and observed, learning by watching and mimicking, preparing to inherit the responsibilities that sustained the city. Every role, from the most humble to the most skilled, was interwoven into the daily rhythm of Rome, forming a network of effort and expertise that enabled the empire to function. Even as the sun climbed higher and the heat grew, the city did not pause. Artisans wiped sweat from their brows, farmers shaded their eyes against the glare of the sun, and merchants adjusted the arrangement of goods to catch buyers' attention. Conversations, laughter, disputes, and the occasional song from a street performer filled the air, blending into a tapestry of sound that defined Rome's character. Lucius, walking home, paused to reflect on the intricate web of labor that made life in the city possible, realizing that every Roman, regardless of status, contributed to the strength and resilience of the empire. By late afternoon, the work of the city continued, shifting from one rhythm to another. The farmers' carts emptied into the markets, artisans put finishing touches on their creations, and apprentices began to close workshops for the day. Yet the pulse of Rome never truly slowed. Each citizen carried their knowledge, skill, and effort into the next day, sustaining the grand civilization through the simple, essential act of labor. The city, magnificent and eternal, owed its survival not only to generals and emperors, but to the countless hands that shaped, molded, and cultivated it day after day. In this vibrant, industrious city, Lucius saw the invisible threads of the empire stretched taut through the lives of its citizens. The clang of the blacksmith, the spin of the potter's wheel, the measured cuts of the carpenter's saw, and the steady rhythm of farmers' plows all wove together into a single, living fabric, the true strength of Rome. It was a city built by its people, sustained by their skill, and immortalized in their daily efforts. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, casting a warm glow over Rome's terracotta rooftops and marble streets, the city's rhythm shifted from the bustle of markets and workshops to the quieter, intimate spaces tucked behind high walls and shuttered windows. Beyond the clang of hammers, the cries of merchants, and the rhythmic turning of potters' wheels, Rome lived in its homes. where families engaged in routines as old as the city itself. While the forum and streets displayed the outward face of the empire, it was behind the walls of domas and insulae that the true essence of Roman life unfolded. The laughter of children, the care of mothers, the counsel of fathers, and the rituals that bound households together. In a modest domus near the Suburb, Lucius, whose mornings had been spent wandering the forum and observing artisans at work, entered the cool, shadowed interior of his home. The walls were adorned with frescoes depicting mythological scenes, gods and heroes frozen in color, while mosaics underfoot traced intricate patterns that spoke to both artistry and wealth. His mother, Julia, moved gracefully through the kitchen, stirring a pot of lentil stew for the family's midday meal, while simultaneously instructing the youngest children on how to fold cloths and set the table. The scent of simmering herbs and warm bread filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of wax from oil lamps that lined the walls. Family life in Rome was both structured and intimate. Fathers provided guidance, reading aloud letters, teaching ethics, or sharing stories of ancestors and great deeds. Lucius's father, a minor clerk in the Senate, paused from his writing to instruct his sons on arithmetic, reading the principles of law that underpinned the governance of the city. Education was not confined to formal lessons, but integrated into daily routines. From measuring grains in the kitchen to balancing accounts in a merchant's ledger, children learned by doing, observing, and participating, absorbing practical knowledge as well as moral instruction. In wealthier households, tutors often oversaw the education of children, teaching Latin, Greek, philosophy, and rhetoric. In smaller homes, fathers or older siblings imparted knowledge through storytelling, debate, and example. Lucius, sitting cross-legged on a mosaic floor, practiced copying letters from a wax tablet, carefully forming each character while listening to his father recount tales of Cincinnatus and other paragons of Roman virtue. Education in Rome was more than literacy. It was the cultivation of character, an apprenticeship in citizenship, and a preparation for the responsibilities that would one day define the empire. Mothers, too, played an essential role in shaping domestic life. Julia oversaw the household, ensuring that food was prepared, spaces were clean, and rituals observed. She instructed her daughters in spinning and weaving, taught her younger children prayers to the household gods, and oversaw the care of small gardens that provided vegetables and herbs for the family table. Her work, though often unseen beyond the home, sustained life in tangible ways. The care of the hearth, the teaching of manners, and the nurturing of health were the invisible threads that held families and, by extension, the city together. Meals were a central aspect of domestic ritual. Even in modest households, food was shared with care and ceremony. Lucius and his siblings gathered around a low wooden table as Julia served bowls of lentil stew, fresh bread, and figs for dessert. The conversation was lively, ranging from lessons in history to playful teasing, and occasionally interrupted by the arrival of a messenger bearing news from the forum or distant provinces. The act of sharing food was not merely sustenance. It was a reaffirmation of family bonds, a daily acknowledgement of care, respect, and shared responsibility. In larger homes, dining took on a more elaborate form, with couches arranged in the triclinium for reclining, servants presenting multiple courses, and conversation ranging from philosophy to politics. These meals, while luxurious, reflected the same underlying principles as in more modest homes: the reinforcement of family structure, the instruction of children in social customs, and the cultivation of civic values. Even as the city hummed with activity outside, each household created its own microcosm, a place where lessons were learned and bonds strengthened. Domestic rituals extended beyond meals. Daily worship of household deities, the lares and Panay, observed in every home. Lucius's family offered incense and small coins to their shrine, whispering prayers for health, prosperity, and protection. Children participated actively, learning early the traditions that connected their personal lives to the wider spiritual and civic culture of Rome. In these small acts, the divine was integrated into the ordinary, a constant presence in the rhythms of family life. Education, work, and ritual intertwined seamlessly. While Lucius copied letters on his wax tablet, his mother sawed herbs and grains, and his siblings practiced weaving, the household was alive with quiet industry. Skills were passed down from one generation to the next through observation and repetition, ensuring that knowledge and expertise remained continuous. From the smallest task, mending a sandal, baking bread, or grinding grain, to the greatest teaching ethics, recounting history, and modeling civic virtue, daily life in Rome was a symphony of activity, harmonized through discipline, care, and communal participation. Neighborhood life extended these domestic rhythms. Families interacted with neighbors, exchanged goods, shared news, and supported one another during times of difficulty. Children played in shared courtyards, women assisted each other with tasks, and men engaged in informal councils to discuss local disputes or plan joint projects. This micro-community reinforced the city's cohesion, showing that the strength of Rome was rooted not only in political and military power, but also in social cohesion and the intimate bonds formed within households and neighborhoods. The influence of domestic life extended to festivals, celebrations, and civic events. Children and adults alike participated in seasonal rites, preparing offerings, decorating homes, and observing traditional ceremonies that reinforced family and community ties. These activities provided a rhythm to life, a calendar that structured daily existence around meaningful events. They also connected private life with the public, blending the personal with the collective identity of the city and empire. As afternoon approached, households prepared for the day's end with a careful sequence of tasks. Food was stored, tools cleaned, lessons reviewed, and shrines tended once more. Lucius's family gathered for a brief repast, sharing reflections on the day, recounting news from the market, and discussing plans for the next day. These moments of quiet reflection reinforced the bonds between family members, providing stability amid the dynamic energy of Rome. Even as the streets hummed with commerce and the forum echoed with debate, the home remained a sanctuary, a place of learning, care, and intimate ritual. In wealthier homes, evenings offered entertainment and leisure, storytelling, musical performances, and philosophical discussion. In smaller homes, the family gathered simply to enjoy one another's presence, telling stories, reciting prayers, and practicing skills that would be essential in adulthood. The continuity of domestic life, its patterns, rituals, and teachings, was a silent but powerful force that maintained the city's identity, culture, and resilience. Lucius, reflecting on the day, recognized that while artisans, merchants, and farmers shaped the outward functioning of Rome, it was the careful, deliberate work within homes that nurtured the values, knowledge, and skills necessary to sustain the empire. From the guidance of fathers and mothers to the participation of children, each household was a microcosm of Rome itself, transmitting culture, ethics, and practical knowledge across generations. Even as night approached, candlelight flickering across frescoed walls, the city's pulse continued. Lucius's family completed evening rituals, offering prayers, sharing a final meal, and recounting events of the day. The city outside had shifted from commerce to conversation, markets to quiet streets, but within the walls, life continued, uninterrupted by the grand narratives of politics or conquest. The empire endured because of these everyday acts: learning, teaching, caring, and practicing tradition. As the morning sun climbed high over Rome, the city's rhythm shifted once again, moving from the intimate spaces of homes and the bustling markets to the grand arenas, theaters, and sacred spaces where the heart of Roman culture beat most vividly. Here, the personal labors of citizens, farmers, artisans, scribes, and merchants found expression in public life, connecting daily routines to the shared identity of the empire. Entertainment and religion intertwined seamlessly, forming a tapestry of civic pride, devotion, and collective exhilaration that resonated through every street and building of the city. The Colosseum, even in its unfinished state, loomed like a sentinel over the city. Early in the morning, gladiators trained within its sand-strewn floor, their movements precise, disciplined, and dangerous. Wooden practice swords clashed rhythmically, echoing against stone walls and announcing the coming spectacle to all who dared to listen. Marcus, a seasoned gladiator, moved with practiced grace, guiding younger recruits through the intricacies of footwork and parry, teaching them not just combat but endurance, courage, and focus. In the stands above, trainers observed, making notes on posture, technique, and stamina. Though peril was inherent in the profession, the discipline and ritual of training reflected a cultural ideal, that excellence and honor were earned through sweat, skill, and courage, both in the arena and in life. Nearby, the Circus Maximus stirred with preparation. Chariots were polished, horses groomed and tethered, and young riders practiced swift maneuvers along the dusty track. The excitement of upcoming races drew crowds from across the city, their anticipation visible in the bustling streets leading toward the grand structure. Merchants sold food and trinkets to early spectators, while performers practiced acrobatics and music to entertain before the main events. The air buzzed with expectation. The city itself seemed to hold its breath in reverence for the spectacle about to unfold. Theatres, too, played an essential role in Roman public life. In open-air venues, such as the Theatre of Pompey, actors rehearsed comedies, tragedies, and historical plays. Costumes were meticulously prepared, masks polished to gleaming perfection, and choruses practiced their songs in time with the rise and fall of the morning sun. Citizens arrived from all districts, eager to witness performances that both entertained and instructed. Comedy provided laughter and relief, often satirizing the foibles of politicians and elites, while tragedies reminded audiences of human frailty, honor, and the consequences of hubris. Theater was not merely amusement, it was education, moral guidance, and communal reflection, a stage upon which society both saw itself and shaped its values. Religious ceremonies formed another layer of Roman public life. Temples opened their massive doors, incense smoke curling into the sky as priests recited invocations to the gods. Citizens approached with offerings, coins, wine, and carefully prepared food. Each ritual was imbued with meaning, whether asking for favor, expressing gratitude, or commemorating significant events. Lucius, walking from the Forum toward the Capitoline Hill, paused at a shrine dedicated to Jupiter, observing citizens of all classes bowing, kneeling, and whispering prayers. Children imitated their elders, learning the gestures, words, and reverence that bound personal life to the divine. These moments of devotion were woven into the daily fabric of the city, grounding the spectacle and labor of public life in spiritual purpose. Festivals transformed Rome into a city of celebration. The streets were decorated with garlands, banners, and temporary structures erected for communal enjoyment. Music, dance, and procession filled the air with energy, merging entertainment and religion into experiences that reinforced civic pride. During festivals honoring gods like Mars, Venus, or Bacchus, citizens participated collectively in ceremonies, competitive games, and public feasts. The rituals were elaborate, precise, and symbolic, reflecting both the devotion of individuals and the unity of the city. Even those who labored in markets and workshops participated, taking time to celebrate, honor, and reflect, reminding all that Rome's strength depended on shared culture as much as on conquest or commerce. In neighborhoods near the Aventine and Palatine Hills, citizens gathered to witness gladiatorial exhibitions, chariot races, and theatrical performances. Merchants set up temporary stalls, selling spiced wine, roasted meats, and sweet pastries. Children ran with wooden swords, mimicking the gladiators they hoped to admire one day. Families found shade under awnings, sharing simple meals while watching the spectacle unfold. The city thrummed with excitement, a living organism that pulsed in harmony with the passions, fears, and joys of its inhabitants. Even in the smallest details, the balance between entertainment, devotion, and civic pride was evident. Gladiators entered the arena with ritualized salutes to the gods. Charioteers prayed before racers, actors and musicians offered thanks for the ability to perform, and spectators joined in communal chants and applause. Each act reinforced the connections between the individual and the city, the personal and the public, the mortal and the divine. Rome, in these moments, was a unified organism, strengthened by the participation, devotion, and joy of its citizens. The Forum itself transformed into a stage for civic celebration. Public speeches, debates, and ceremonial displays of power coincided with festivals, highlighting Rome's identity as both a political and cultural center. Senators, magistrates, and priests performed their duties in full view, blending authority with ritual, demonstrating that civic pride was inseparable from public spectacle. Citizens witnessed the enactment of power, morality, and cultural values, understanding their role in maintaining the stability and prestige of the city. Food, music, and artistry intersected with these spectacles. Street performers played flutes, harps, and percussion instruments, creating an auditory tapestry that rivaled the visual grandeur of arenas and temples. Artisans displayed temporary creations, mosaics, statues, and tapestries to celebrate festivals and commemorate events. Vendors offered delicacies, from olives and cheeses to exotic fruits imported from across the empire. Even the citizens felt part of a larger culture, their daily lives enriched and contextualized by participation in shared celebrations. The interplay between entertainment and religion also served as a moral compass. Gladiatorial games, while violent, were framed as acts of courage and discipline, honoring gods and exemplifying ideals of bravery. Theatrical performances illustrated virtues and vices, reminding citizens of the consequences of hubris, greed, or dishonor. Festivals reinforced civic identity, encouraging unity, respect for tradition, and adherence to societal norms. Each spectacle, whether violent, comedic, or sacred, was a tool to educate, inspire, and maintain social cohesion. Lucius, moving through the city during one such festival, observed the orchestration of life, the preparation of arenas, the procession of priests, the rehearsal of actors, and the careful arrangement of market stalls. Every individual, whether a laborer, artisan, merchant, or child, played a part in the city's rhythm. The daily routines of home, work, and devotion converged here, forming a living testament to the strength, complexity, and beauty of Roman culture. By mid-afternoon, the games and ceremonies reached their crescendo. Chariots thundered along tracks, sending clouds of dust spiraling into the sunlit sky. Gladiators faced each other with discipline and focus, their every movement choreographed to balance spectacle with survival. Actors performed scenes of myth and history, evoking laughter, tears, and reflection. Priests led processions, offering incense and prayers to deities who were omnipresent yet intangible, their favor sought and honored in every gesture. The city resonated with a sense of purpose, passion, and shared identity that united citizens across class, profession, and background. As the sun began its descent, streets gradually emptied, but the memory of the day's spectacles lingered. Citizens returned home, families discussed events, and children recounted what they had seen with awe and excitement. The lessons of courage, devotion, and civic pride absorbed during the day became integrated into private life, connecting personal growth with the collective life of the city. Rome's strength rested not only in its walls, markets, or armies, but in the enduring culture of participation, learning, and celebration. Evening rituals mirrored those in the homes, blending the lessons of the public arena with domestic life. Families offered thanks to household gods. Children recounted stories of gladiators and actors, and parents reminded their children of the virtues observed that day. Entertainment and devotion, civic pride and personal reflection, all intertwined seamlessly. The city's heartbeat, amplified in arenas, theaters, and festivals, found resonance in the quiet intimacy of homes, connecting public spectacle with personal meaning. Lucius, as reflecting on the day, understood that Roman culture was sustained by both labor and leisure, devotion and celebration. The hands that built the city in workshops and fields also guided citizens in public rituals and festivals. The collective participation of ordinary people, whether as spectators, performers, or worshippers, ensured that the values, stories, and pride of Rome were perpetuated from one generation to the next. The empire was not merely a political entity, it was a living organism, nurtured by shared experience, spectacle, and devotion. As the sun began its slow descent behind Rome's 7 hills, the city exhaled, releasing the heat and clamor of the day into the fading light. Streets that had thrummed with the energy of markets, workshops, and public spectacles gradually emptied, leaving echoes of laughter, shouting, and the rhythmic clatter of carts fading into memory. The golden glow of sunset cast long shadows across the cobblestones, softening the rigid lines of stone columns, bridges, and fountains. It was a time of transition, when the city shifted from the public to the private, from bustling action to quiet reflection, and from collective energy to personal contemplation. Merchants closed their stalls, carefully securing goods for the next day. Bread vendors stacked leftover loaves, and fishmongers washed away traces of the day's business, their hands red-stained from handling scales and fillets. Artisans locked their workshops, extinguished lamps, and packed away tools, leaving behind the traces of skill, dedication, and labor that had sustained the city's pulse throughout the morning and afternoon. The clang of hammers, the hum of wheels, and the scent of wood smoke, clay and forge fires gradually dissolved into the soft hush of evening. In neighborhoods near the Aventine and Palatine, families began returning home from the forum markets and public games. Others carried news from the day, recounting stories of triumphs, debates, or the morning's unusual events. Mothers prepared evening meals, the aroma of simmering stews, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread filling homes and winding through narrow alleys. Children, tired from play or errands, trailed behind their parents, some carrying small offerings for household shrines. In every home, the transition from public bustle to private reflection followed a familiar rhythm. Wash, prepare, eat, offer thanks, and recount the day's experiences. Lucius, whose mornings had begun with observation of artisans and afternoons with public spectacles, returned to his modest domus near the Subut. The fading sunlight illuminated the mosaics on the floor and the frescoes along the walls, highlighting tales of gods, heroes, and mythological triumphs. Candlelight soon replaced the sun's glow, flickering across the carefully painted scenes, and casting dancing shadows that seemed to bring figures to life. The room felt warm, intimate, and alive, yet quiet. As the family gathered for the evening meal, simple yet carefully prepared stew of lentils, fresh bread, figs, and olives, conversation flowed gently, a contrast to the clamorous debates of the forum or the shouts of the marketplace. Lucius's father shared observations from the day, weaving lessons of morality, civic duty, and personal responsibility into stories that entertained and instructed simultaneously. His mother reminded the children of their household duties and the importance of care, respect, and devotion to both family and gods. In these moments, the education of youth continued, not through formal lessons alone, but through example, conversation, and gentle correction. Every shared meal, every story told, every glance and gesture reinforced values that would shape the next generation. The household gods were honored once more. Lucius carefully placed a small coin at the feet of the Lares, whispering a prayer for protection, health, and guidance. His siblings joined in, learning to mimic the gestures and words of reverence, while his parents observed with quiet pride. The ritual, though small, held enormous weight in connecting daily life with divine favor, reminding the family that their private lives were intrinsically linked to the spiritual and cultural life of the empire. Outside, the streets of Rome had taken on a softer, more contemplative quality. Torches glimmered along walls and in public spaces, casting warm pools of light against the darkening stone. The Tiber reflected the fading colors of the sunset, rippling gently under the faint breeze. Citizens walked slowly home, pausing occasionally to speak with neighbors, exchange pleasantries, or offer small gifts to shrines tucked into alleys and corners. The city exuded both exhaustion and serenity, a collective sigh after the intensity of the day's activity. In wealthier homes, candlelit dinners reflected both abundance and ritual. Servants moved silently, presenting courses of meat, fruits, and wine, while families engaged in measured conversation, storytelling, and reflection. Music, when played, was soft, providing accompaniment to the intimacy of shared meals and the gentle closing of the day. Even here, the balance between public spectacle and private contemplation was evident. The same families that had attended games, festivals, and ceremonies earlier now honored tradition in quieter, more personal ways. For artisans and laborers, evening meant tidying workshops, storing tools, and occasionally mending or preparing for the next day's work. The effort of the morning and afternoon left traces: wood, shavings, clay dust, smudges of ink and sootbar. The ritual of order restored calm. Each craftsperson reflected briefly on accomplishments, struggles, and lessons learnt, internalizing experience and integrating it into the ongoing story of life in Rome. As night deepened, the city seemed to breathe, its pulse slowing but never ceasing. Lucius sat by a small window, watching shadows lengthen and merge. The moon rose over the hills, silvering rooftops and glinting across the Tiber. distant sounds, the bark of a dog, the occasional carriage rolling along cobblestones. A solitary flute created a quiet symphony of life that never truly slept. In these moments, the city revealed its eternal rhythm. Labor, family, devotion, celebration, and reflection woven into a tapestry that transcended time. Even children felt the shift into contemplation. Stories of heroes, gods, and past events were recounted. Games of learning ended, and quiet reflection became a natural conclusion to the day. Lessons absorbed during labor, domestic life, and public spectacle now intertwined, forming a mental and moral landscape that would shape future choices, values, and ambitions. Lucius, king of the blacksmiths, potters, and carpenters he had observed, the families he had visited, and the spectacles he had witnessed, felt a profound connection to the living city around him, a bond that linked past, present, and future. Religious devotion continued alongside reflection. Households recited prayers, made small offerings, and gave thanks for protection, prosperity, and guidance. Festivals, games, and public ceremonies had left impressions of courage, virtue, and communal identity, while the quiet of the evening allowed these lessons to settle into memory. Citizens understood that Rome's power rested not merely in walls, armies, or political decrees, but in the continuity of care, tradition, and reflection that spanned both public and private life. In quieter streets, philosophers and scholars walked slowly, discussing ideas of morality, justice, and human nature under the soft glow of lamps. Their conversations meandered, touching on lessons from the day, observations of behavior, and reflections on culture and society. Even as the city slept, learning and contemplation persisted, a reminder that the empire's vitality depended equally on thought as on labor, spectacle, and devotion. The night air carried the faint scent of wood smoke, bread, herbs, and the river. Our citizens paused at fountains, whispered blessings to statues of gods, and shared small tokens of kindness with neighbors. In these fleeting moments, the city's interconnectedness became tangible. Every act, no matter how small, contributed to the life, resilience, and identity of Rome. The empire's heartbeat could be felt not only in grand arenas and bustling markets, but in the quiet streets, homes, and hearts of ordinary people. Lucius finally lay down in his modest chamber, reflecting on the day that had unfolded like a tapestry. Morning labor in markets and workshops, afternoons of public spectacle and devotion, and evenings of quiet contemplation and familial ritual. He thought of blacksmiths shaping metal, potters molding clay, carpenters crafting furniture, mothers teaching children, priests conducting rituals, gladiators and charioteers performing in arenas, and neighbors sharing in communal life. Each thread, each action, combined to form the living, breathing organism that was Rome. In these reflections, he understood a truth often lost to history. The empire endured not solely through conquest, wealth, or politics, but through the cumulative devotion, labor, culture, and reflection of its citizens. From the smallest household to the grandest temple, every hand, mind, and heart contributed to the continuity, identity, and vitality of the city. Rome was eternal, not merely because of its stone and marble, but because it lived in its people, in their routines, rituals, and reflections. As sleep approached, Lucius envisioned the city at night, quiet streets, glowing lamps, rippling river, flickering shadows, and homes filled with warmth, conversation, and prayer. The city's pulse slowed, but did not cease, a testament to continuity and resilience. In these hours, Rome was simultaneously alive and introspective, a place where lessons of labor, domestic life, public spectacle, and devotion coalesced into enduring identity. Rome, in all its grandeur, was not built solely by emperors or generals, but by the unseen rhythm of ordinary lives, laborers shaping tools, potters spinning clay, children learning, mothers guiding, fathers instructing, priests praying, performers entertaining, and citizens reflecting. The city's walls contained not just stone, marble, and frescoes, but the countless stories of daily effort, devotion, and love. Twilight revealed the invisible threads that bound society together: connection, memory, care, and reflection. As night embraced the city, Rome was simultaneously tangible and eternal, a living organism, sustained by generations, each day leaving its imprint, each night offering space to reflect, remember, and dream. In every quiet street, candlelit room, and whispered prayer, the spirit of the empire persisted, reminding us that the heart of Rome was, and always would be, its people.